Hi, I'm Annika Vogt, co-curator of the current group exhibition, A Winter's Tale, on display within the windows of the Athens Cultural Center. A Winter's Tale harkens back to days old, when a well-told tale had the power to ignite imagination and wonder. This exhibition features Hudson Valley, New York-based artists Iria Bodien, Jenny Getty, Ellen Menzies, Danielle Norris, and Christine Feaster, whose works explore storytelling through the lens of both fairy tale and newly constructed narratives. A Winter's Tale is on display December 5th, 2020 through January 17th, 2021, and the Athens Cultural Center is located at 24 2nd Street in Athens, New York. Now, without further ado, the Athens Cultural Center and Dr. Evarts Library is pleased to present this video series examining Hudson Valley lore with A Winter's Tale co-curator Amanda Lees and Greene County historian Jonathan Palmer. We hope you enjoy and thank you for watching.
Hey everybody, my name is Jonathan Palmer. I'm the village historian for Athens, New York, and we're in the Old Leeds Cemetery today, very far from the village, but talking about a story, a similar legend to the one of Sally Hamilton, about a young woman who meets an untimely fate, and the way the horrible circumstances of that event manifest themselves in an entirely different way than the story of Sally Hamilton did down in the village of Athens proper. The story we're going to talk about, it goes by various titles. Some people might know it as the Hangman's Noose, or the Ghost of Spook Hollow, or and this is one example of the many different ways the story has manifested itself over the years, and how different people will have heard different accounts of it at different times, depending on who the teller was or which source they read. But it all begins in 1755 here in the hamlet of Leeds, when it was still called Catskill, and it's about a young woman named Anna Dorothea Swartz, who was probably an indentured servant of a man by the name of William Salisbury, who was a member of one of the oldest families in the vicinity of Old Catskill. His grandfather had been a bigwig in the colonial government in New Netherland right after it had been taken over by the English to become the colony of New York. His son ends up with a patent here in Leeds that he settles on, and his grandsons are the inheritors of two large stone houses in Leeds, which become kind of the seats of the family estate for 2 generations. This indentured servant girl, Anna Swartz, in 1755, for unknown circumstances, leaves William Salisbury's house, allegedly running away, and he goes out and chases her down by horse, catches up with her, depending on the account, in the vicinity of what's now kind of the modern thruway entrance in Leeds, at what point he dismounts the horse, gets her, ties her up, and by a cord binds her to the back of the horse and proceeds to lead her home. The horse bolts, she is dragged along behind the horse to her death, and he is held accountable for that murder only 7 years later, in 1762, when he's brought on trial in the court at Albany for her murder. And for whatever number of reasons, whether it was because he was a wealthy landowner or because there was no other evidence to tie him to the crime, or that there was malicious intent, or that it was anything other than just an accident, he is acquitted of the murder. He isn't found guilty, he isn't found not guilty, the jury's just hung and leaves it with a hung verdict, and everybody goes about their business, and William Salisbury lives out his life here in Leeds and dies in 1801. The legend is first recorded about Anna's murder in the 1820s by a guy from Hudson who chronicles a visit to the Catskill Mountain House the year it was opened in 1824, and tells the story of a ghost that's seen in the vicinity of Leeds on the road leading out to the mountains. and this ghost was allegedly a servant girl who was heinously murdered by William Salisbury, with malicious intent. He tied her to the horse and slapped the horse, and the horse took off and killed her, and he was angry at her for running off. And her apparition, along with a host of other apparitions, according to this 1824 retelling, persist in haunting the hamlet of Leeds, travelers on the road, and the Salisbury house itself. There's an apparition allegedly of a skeleton cloaked in robes that's seen on the road with a ghost horse towing it along, and there's a woman who is seen on occasion sitting on a stone wall near the manor house with candle-like flames coming from her fingertips and a maniacal laugh. There's a ghost dog seen barking at the manor house. There's a ghost cow seen on the hillside lowing in a mourning tone about the murder. There's the ghost horse itself, which is kind of portrayed like you'd think of the ghost horse in the legends of Sleepy Hollow, with the flaring nostrils and its white aspect and its burning red eyes, lit with hellfire or something like that. And the story at that point in the 1820s is dripped with all sorts of romantic connotations, which were so popular among storytellers at that time. This is around the same period that Washington Irving is authoring his book, The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, from which we get the legend of Sleepy Hollow and the legend of Rip Van Winkle. So people coming to the Catskills in this new era are craving these stories of the ancient past and the way the spirits of that kind of lost time manifest themselves in the place. So what better audience to hear the first recorded retelling of Anna Swartz's murder than these new travelers to this place?
Hi, I'm Amanda Lees, and I'm one of the co-curators of A Winter's Tale at the Athens Cultural Center. And I'm back here with John because I have a few more questions after that really tragic tale of Anna Swartz and William Salisbury. First is, when did this happen in relation to the murder of Sally Hamilton in Athens?
Yeah, so they occur essentially 60 years apart, but the important thing to remember is that, one occurs in the colony of New York in 1755 under their legal system and with a somewhat different class structure and class sense, kind of a holdover from the Dutch period, the original people who settled the place. And Sally Hamilton in 1813, she's murdered in Athens, in a relatively new town in the young republic, after the revolution has occurred.
Yeah. What about the stories of Anna Swartz and Sally Hamilton make them such an interesting comparison?
Well, aside from the periods that they occur in, the story of Anna Swartz, or however you want to spell it or pronounce it.
I know, I could be messing it up.
Well, no, it varies. Just like so many things about her story. Sally Hamilton, really, at the end of the day, the story goes, Sally Hamilton was killed. We never found her killer. And, gee, there's her ghost by the bridge. Isn't that sad? Mm-hmm. Anna Swartz's story is, wow, allegedly, William Salisbury killed one of the servant girls up here in Spooky Hollow, and some people say you can see that, oh my God, there it is, a giant skeleton cloaked in winding sheets with a horse with fiery red eyes dragging it to its doom in perpetuity. It's a whole different ethos behind the retelling of that story. It's horrifying. It's meant to scare people. It's meant to make people mad. You know? So
there's a lot more drama and horror in it.
Yeah.
What does this story say about what class relations looked like in this area at the time?
So the period that Anna Swartz is killed in the 1750s, it's in the midst of the French and Indian War, and it's in the midst of a period of social upheaval in the Hudson Valley where poorer citizens of the place are kind of contending with this class disparity, which is probably best reflected in the same sentiment as it manifested here in the 1830s in the 40s during the anti-rent wars. You know, so it's this anger, in a sense, this kind of boiling hatred at this ruling class who, you know, are the ones who have agency in the law, they have agency in the community, at the expense of the voices of those beneath them. So.
Did William Salisbury's family or suffer any social repercussions because of this crime?
Well, no, specifically. You know, he's a member of the ruling class. You know, he's one of the landed gentry of this place. Anna Swartz was a lowly servant girl. You know, he wasn't even convicted of the crime of killing her. So his son ends up being a member of the Continental Army during the Revolution. He was an officer. His grandson, I think, if I've got the right guy in my head, ends up being a general during the Civil War, too. I mean, this is a very well-to-do family. It's a well-respected family. And you get a sense that there might have been some animosity that manifests itself only in the perpetuation of this story about William Salisbury and the murder he committed.
Yeah. How has this community dealt with this story since it happened?
Oh, it's, you know, again, to get back to Sally Hamilton, you know, Sally Hamilton's legend has essentially one telling. Anna Swartz's murder has dozens of tellings. The community itself here has versions of the legend that are carried on from, you know, even before it's first recorded in the 1820s. It was clearly being told by locals at that time even. And that's only like, 20 years after William Salisbury's dead. But there's also versions of it that are distributed widely to a national audience. There's the 1824 recording of it that's done by a newspaper guy from Hudson, is widely circulated, and it's the one that kind of gets all those romantic images draped onto it of, like, you know, the animals and the aspect of the ghost and things like that. There's an 1862 novelization of it in which Anna Swartz is not portrayed as, you know, a German servant girl. She's portrayed as an African slave. So her race changes to give that class of people, these slaves who are part of this great national contest at the beginning of the Civil War, these enslaved people are suddenly given agency in a story that they weren't present in previously, but in the telling of Anna Swartz's story, their voice is given to them in that 1862 account.
Wow.
That's a 500-page novel.
Wow.
Yeah, and they changed the Salisbury's name to Sutherland or Sunderland or something like that.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. Who do you think Anna really was? A slave, indentured servant, or?
You know, so that's an excellent question, and I got to give a shout out here to the book I've been holding this entire time, and the book that I'm using heavily as a crutch for all of this is it's an academic, it's a scholarly work done by Judith Richardson, professor. It's called Possessions and the History and Uses of Haunting in the Hudson Valley. And it has a very large chapter. I mean, it's like a quarter of the book is just about the Salisbury ghost and Leeds. And she breaks this thing down. She finds just about every version of its retelling, whether it be the 1975 version from the Daily Mail or the 1824 version that's done by William Leete Stone, or the 1862 account, or all the accounts from the 1890s and the Gilded Age. You know, she breaks them all down and talks about how Anna, you know, her race changes, her ethnicity changes based on who's telling the story and what the social upheaval of that time is. So in the 1890s, in the midst of the Gilded Age, she's a young Scotswoman all of a sudden.
Oh, wow.
She wasn't a Scotswoman.
Yeah.
You know, she was, you know, and it changes between her being an indentured servant, a simple servant girl, or a slave, you know.
Yeah.
So it's all about the time and place where it's told.
Yeah, power of a story. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to finishing that book. I have started it, and the writing is fantastic. And
Yeah.
it's a wonderful examination of a ghost story.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Richardson.
Yeah. Speaking of ghost stories, if the first written account of this story is that heavily embellished version with all the ghost animals and details like that, how do we know that this crime actually happened?
The only scrap of a paper trail of anything left is this strange kind of, it's like a half of a legal sized sheet of paper. It's actually an animal skin, a vellum or something like that. It's the indictment of William Salisbury for the murder. 7 years after Anna Swartz is killed by the horse, whether by William Salisbury's agency or otherwise, he is indicted for the crime of killing her. And it gives you who the juror was. Abraham Dow is the foreman of the jury and things like that. And he's a guy who pops up in other court records. And so it gives all the salient points of the crime. And then on the back side, it gives the verdict of the jury, which is simply written as ignoramus, which is kind of an outdated legal term, which we wouldn't associate as a legal term now, which essentially said that the jury was hung. So, we know that he didn't commit the crime, but in most of the popular retellings, he is portrayed as having been found guilty of the crime. This is the local people getting mad about this guy who cheated the hangman's noose. So instead of literally just getting away with the crime like he does in reality, the retellers of this story vest him with this kind of insider dealing power where, the jury convicts him, but because of his affluence and power, he gets away with it and cheats the hangman. He gets sentenced to death only if he lives to the age of 99 years. And up until that time, as a reminder that he cheated the hangman, he has to wear a cord around his neck as a reminder. So this story of the local, the elderly Dutch landowner with that cord around his neck reminding him of the crime he committed, and, the telling goes into his disdain for it and how eventually the cord becomes a silken thread that he wears that's barely visible and things like that. It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so. Wow, it truly is, right?
Yeah.
Last question. Do you believe that Salisbury Manor is haunted?
I have no idea, and that's, a ghost story, ghosts are perpetuated in the retelling, and like so many reasons that ghost stories appear to begin with, because of change or because of, people's feel of a lack of agency in something or one thing or another. A lot of the places that were originally associated with the legend are gone now. So Spooky Hollow, which was once a district between Jefferson Heights and Leeds, where the thruway exchange is now, you can't see the ghost horse charging along through the night, dragging Anna Swartz to her doom anymore. The place where it happened is no longer there. It's literally been dynamited away. What might have been William Salisbury's house, which was the old 1705 manor house built by his father, is gone now. It was burned in 1929, and the other 1730 manor house, which was originally William's brother's, which is the one that a lot of people associate with the story today, I'm not sure whether or not he actually ever had a direct association with it, or if it was always in the possession of his, brother and nieces and nephews and otherwise, So, where once we could travel through these places at night on a quiet country road and recollect the ghosts, all the hustle and bustle today, the only place that these ghosts seem to exist for many of us now is in the retelling.
Yeah. Well, keep those ghosts alive and keep retelling the story, as tragic as it may be. Thank you so much, John.
So, after the last clip that we did on the legend of Sally Hamilton, I had some closing thoughts prepared, because Sally Hamilton's story can, I think, really be distilled quite simply into, this essential truth about it and what it says about community and place. But Anna Swartz's story, and the story of the hangman's noose and Spooky Hollow and William Salisbury cheating the hangman and getting away with this crime, is vested with so much cultural tension. There's class tension in it. There's a sense you get of the animosity that the community felt towards this man who did this heinous thing and got away with it, whereas with Sally Hamilton, Athenians had to grapple with never knowing, or never being satisfied with the result of the crime, never knowing who killed her. With the story of Anna Swartz, even though she was a member of a marginalized community of people, she was of a lower class, you still get the sense that, here we know exactly who killed her. And here's somebody that we know what he did, and he never paid for it. So rather than a jury indicting him, the story indicts him in that sense. And the retellings of it get wrapped up in so many other aspects of the history of this place, and the history of tourism here, and people wanting to hear these stories, and the history of people feeling a possession of place and being able to retell this story as a symbol of their ownership of the place and its heritage and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's just a really great, probably one of the most famous folk stories to ever come out of Greene County. I don't think there's a single other tale that's ever been as widely publicized or as academically treated by different people as has the story of Anna Swartz. So from the Leeds Cemetery, I guess we'll close.